Welcome to this week's episode of Biz Success in 15, where top experts share hot tips and strategies that you can implement in as little as 15 minutes to build your dream business. And now here's your host, the Visibility Wiz, Cindy J.
Hi, I'm Cindy J, the Visibility Wiz. Welcome to this episode of Biz Success in 15, where top experts share hot tips and strategies that you can implement in 15 minutes or less. Today, our guest is Ken Korse. He is known nationally for his high energy, experiential, and interactive presentations that give audiences momentum in their business now. Ken has developed and consulted on 10 plus multi-million dollar program launches. He has been featured in front of audiences at more than 150 events in the US, Canada, Australia, and the UK. He has shared stage with speaking legends like Les Brown, Mark Victor Hansen, Kevin Harrington, Nancy Matthews, and more. He is the founder of Explore Momentum and On-Course Marketing. Ken's Momentum Now community provides businesses the resources and connections to create and launch their own client-attracting training programs. Welcome, Ken.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. And to begin, I would love to ask you a question I ask all of our guests. If you could please describe a personal or business challenge that you had to overcome in order to achieve your level of success.
Right. What's interesting is I feel like that no matter what level of business or especially personal development that you're at, you're always experiencing different types of challenges. And I was a person that was known for many years as being a trainer and an expert for other trainers and experts. So I spent years working for over 5 different training companies, helping run workshops, and was really known as somebody that was associated with other trainers and experts. And unfortunately, the company that I'd worked with for many, many years had a very ugly and messy divorce and getting out of that. And when that happened just a couple of years ago, it forced me to really look at myself and my business and what I wanted to be. At that point, I wasn't really focused on having a business of my own. I'd always had a marketing consulting agency, but most of my speaking and training was done for other companies and other organizations. And so it really forced me to stop and look and say, I love working with small businesses. I love helping people find new customers, make more sales, get the right systems in place. And I had to make a decision at that point whether or not I was going to continue down this path or if I was going to focus on something else. And the nature of the way that happened, I really had to think about coming up with something new and different and a different way to approach it. So over that time, I really had to reinvent myself and act very quickly, to get through that process. And it actually resulted in, the biggest year of revenue for my consulting business. And it resulted in the creation of Explore Momentum. It wouldn't really have existed had I not gone through that process, which at the time was extremely difficult and extremely painful. And again, it's how most people knew me over the years, as being a speaker and trainer for somebody else.
It was really developing a new identity, I would assume.
Yeah. And I think you always have to do that in business. You have to stay ahead because obviously it depends on what your clients and your customers want over time. Like, that this as a marketing person, that the demands of the industry change. And especially entrepreneurship and small business, what's hot today, is different than what was hot 2 years ago, which is different than what was hot 5 years ago. And it's especially these days, I feel like that evolves faster and faster. And so you'll always have your core thing. That's the thing that you kind of flag in the sand that says, this is me. But then beyond that, your marketing and your materials have to adapt based on what works in the market right now.
Right. And speaking about marketing,
yeah.
I know so many people, they think that that's, worse than any 4-letter word you could say.
Dirty word.
Yeah, they're really afraid of the word and they think that it's this monstrous thing. And I know that you have some blunders that a lot of entrepreneurs make whenever they are marketing their businesses. So can you share a couple of those with us?
Oh yeah. Well, first of all, let me give a definition of marketing and try to flip it on its head. And some of you may have heard something similar to this over the years, but really I want you to boil everything in your business boils down to your customer, boils down to your people. And for the most part, marketing is just the conversation that's introducing yourself to your customer. They don't know who you are. They don't know what you do. They're not familiar with you. It's the same as when you walk into a networking event or even a party and people don't know know who you are, and you've got to go out and you've got to have that conversation to introduce yourself. And eventually,
Pass the cookies.
yeah, exactly. And for the most part, if you walk in and you're really weird, which some people do this, and you go right into your sales pitch or right into your elevator pitch or right into the things that a lot of workshops and trainers train you to do, it comes off as really strange. You wouldn't introduce yourself that way at a party. You'd have a conversation, and you'd start by asking questions, and you'd start by figuring out what the other person is interested in, and does it make sense to introduce yourself that way or not. And so, most people, I think it boils down to, there's recent statistics that say that 70% of people would rather die than have to public speak in any way rather than have to interact. And it just comes down to anxiety. A lot of us don't know what to say about ourselves or don't know how to talk about our business. And so that makes it really hard. And I assure you, my first major marketing campaign I ran in my life, no one's going to do worse than this. I just don't think it's possible. On a $64,000 budget. That's $64,000, which for some of you out there, when you hear that, go, oh my God, like that's more money than I'm making right now, let alone would spend on one marketing campaign. On that campaign, which happened to be a direct mail campaign, we only returned 13 leads. So that boils down to a wonderful, many thousands of dollars per lead on that campaign. And there were lots of reasons for it. But in reality, it was a lot of the things I teach people in terms of, how we had chosen our target market was a little bit off, where we were trying to do it. We had a bad vendor in that case who was really overcharging us for direct mail pieces, and so we were dealing with a lot of that. A lot of the list that we were sending out to, everything that could go wrong with this campaign went wrong. The list that we were sending to of addresses had a disproportionate amount of bad addresses and people that didn't live there anymore and typos. So not only that, in this campaign we'd received tens of thousands of these direct mail pieces back because they were going to bad addresses, and they were sitting as piles all throughout our office when that was happening when we started. So for most of you who are worried about spending your first 10 or 20 bucks in marketing or your first $100, keep that in mind when, especially me saying, I'm the marketing expert, listen to me. And in my first campaign, I failed about as spectacularly as one could fail. The good news was, at the same time, a couple of the other ideas, and this is a lesson to take away, a couple of the other ideas that I was working on at the same time were actually taking off in a huge way. They actually offset the loss of what we had done on that other side. And so that means, when it comes to your marketing, you got to have multiple irons in the fire. A lot of the things you're going to do are going to fail. Right off the bat, you just have to be prepared for it and say, that's the reality of marketing. Not all marketing pieces work. Sometimes there are reasons that go so far beyond what you would be able to plan for or think of. I know many expert marketers who have struggled to take on the new form of marketing, digital marketing and all of that stuff, and they don't even do it. And I know many digital marketers who struggle when they go into other spaces, and many digital marketers will tell you right off the bat, your first few dollars you spend on a lot of the new platforms like Facebook ads or Google ads, it's gambling. You're probably going to lose a lot of that first budget as you answer some of these questions. So,
and regardless, you have great lessons that you learn from this. Whether it's $100 or $64,000 campaign, you have to look at it as, what did I learn from it?
Yes.
And you was talking about various platforms. I always say multiple streams of visibility instead of multiple streams of income, because I know one of the biggest mistakes I see a lot of entrepreneurs making, I wonder if you agree with this, is putting all of their eggs in Facebook. And Facebook is a great tool. It's a fantastic tool, but it shouldn't be somebody's only strategy.
Oh, absolutely not. Well, and to me, if you want to really be consistent about making money, you want to mix up your digital strategy and your offline strategy. It's why you see so many people who are experts in digital marketing, including myself, that still do live events, that still speak, that still get on other stages. Money is really made in that direct conversation with people. And that doesn't mean that funnels don't work and things like that. I'm not saying that, because they do, but those things take time. They take effort. They take
Mhm.
fixing. The real genius of getting a marketing funnel to work isn't just getting the initial build out the door. It's adjusting when you see certain things aren't working. If your offer or your promotional material or your, upsell campaigns or any of the pieces of it don't work, that's going to take time. And in the interim, what most people need to be doing is staying diverse. They need to have 4 or 5 different ways that customers hear about them as opposed to just one. And the thing about Facebook these days is Facebook isn't any different than any of the rules for marketing on any other platforms. It used to be, and this is why there's so much hype around Facebook. It used to be so much cheaper and easier to get leads from Facebook. And if you know what you're doing, it still can be. But for those of you who don't and who are new to the platform and figuring it out, you're going to go through the same learning curve that most of us do when we first start spending money to try to get customers or to get traffic, in that you got to really validate, do you know who your customer is? Do you know what they want specifically? And have you tested it in other places as well? Like, like you said, don't throw all your eggs into social media if you haven't even had a conversation with someone to see if you can sell something to them in person.
Right.
Or if you haven't talked to your previous customers and said, all right, I'm launching this new offer, I'm testing this new thing, and see how if your highest and best customers aren't responding to it, chances are people that don't know you very well are definitely not going to respond to that creative or that offer or what you're working on. So diversity is so key in what you're doing. And for me, especially for you newbies out there, I would say you at least want to have 2 different online strategies and 2 different offline strategies that you're working on. And actually in the early days, I would even skew that more to more of the offline. More time should be used getting in front of people wherever you can with things like speaking or product or that kind of thing.
Especially the offline strategies. What
Uh-huh.
are a couple of offline strategies that people can work on?
Okay, so obviously you and I were talking before this about networking for a lot of people, and leveraging things like, local networking groups. Meetup groups are so huge to be able to meet like-minded entrepreneurs and business people. Meetup groups really for 2 years was how I met all of my clients, was, seeing what meetups were going on in the area, going to the group, meeting people, and then following up with them, which that's the key too. A lot of people don't do enough follow-up to get that done. Speaking, and especially for those of you, if you're in an area where you're like, I don't see a meetup group that fits what I'm doing or that works, a lot of times you can be the host to start one. If you don't see the one that you want out there and you want to get people involved, start one. And in your first few, you might only have a couple people there, but if you're consistent about it over time, a lot of times as the leader, you can use that as a platform to network, to speak, to get things going. For those of you who don't look for speaking opportunities, that's another huge one. I mean, start with your local chambers of commerce or your BNI groups or your Toastmasters groups in those areas, and speak wherever and whenever you can, whether it's 3 people or 100 people, whenever you can get out and start speaking in front of people about your topic. And then if you translate those same things to online, we're basically talking about the same things like this interview, podcasts, Facebook Live, your social media. They're all just ways of translating those same skills, to the online space as the same as you would offline. And the other thing that's important to note about what would technically be a kind of traditional media or offline marketing is that radio and television time is dirt cheap these days compared to what it used to be. And a lot of times in markets, I know of somebody that hosts a radio show in a large market that's paying less than $1,000 a year for a weekly slot in a decent place. So a lot of people who want to throw that $1,000 at Facebook, might look at some of the traditional media channels and go, hey, this might be something that could be workable if you have that content or if that's something you want to do. So the market, Facebook has actually changed a lot of these things so that other channels have become a lot cheaper than they used to be.
And I would have never thought of that, but I love that tip. That's really interesting. And it is true. I notice also a lot of people, they don't like even advertising in national magazines and stuff, which I think would probably go along the same thing. They're less expensive than they used to be, and they're still work.
Right. Well, and all of these mediums, like I mentioned, direct mail. I mean, there are many services out there that exist that if you're going to do a local event in an area, sending out a direct mail piece is very, very cheap these days compared to what it used to be. And the accessibility of lists of people and those types of things for more traditional marketing are actually really helpful. to be able to get into in terms of price. And it all depends. Here's the reality. All of this depends on how well you know your potential customer, how well you know your leads. And the more that you get to know, which really is the more you talk to people, and the more that you network and the more that you work with them, the more that it'll become easier and easier to see these opportunities. So, for example, if your market is a market that travels a lot, and I've seen this a lot, that maybe, using advertisements in airplane publications or Sky Mall or something like that actually might make sense. If you know the audience is there, you don't have to shy away from it. Now, again, it's not that digital marketing is bad. In fact, digital marketing is how I make my living. But the reality is, for a lot of people, if your audience is there, and especially for those of you that have, highly professional audiences or audiences that aren't spending a ton of time on Facebook, like you said, don't throw your eggs in that basket. You've got to really get clear on who your audience is, how they behave, what do they do, where are they most of the time, and where are they most likely to meet you? The same as you would when you're considering going to a networking event or where you invest your time. All that just boils down to, do I believe that my target person is there? Do I think that that's where they're hanging out, or that's where they're going to be most likely to see me? And I know plenty of people that still make a killing doing only the traditional type of advertising that we're talking about. And they very much enjoy the fact that the pricing and all that has become much more competitive. And, it just depends on your market.
It's great advice. I could talk to you forever about marketing, but for time's sake,
Sure.
I do want to move on. And I know that you have a strategy that our listeners can listen to grow their business and implement in as little as 15 minutes. So can you share that with us?
So let me talk about content here for a minute, because one of the big things that differentiates businesses these days is their ability to consistently produce and share content. And so normally when you stack all of the work that people need to do, like I can even list without a list in front of me, all the different things that experts will tell you. You need to be on Facebook. You need to be on Instagram. You need to be on Google. You need to have your blogs. You need to have your podcast. You need to be on stages. You need to write your book. Like, that's just 7 right there. And normally when a coach or a mentor or someone speaking to you stacks all those things in front of you on stage, it starts getting really, really overwhelming. You say, how am I going to come up with all of that different content? And so part of the thing that people don't do enough of, and what I wanted to share in this little piece, is what you want to be doing is leveraging and repurposing your content way more consistently than you are. In fact, I was just at a recent presentation, and I'm always watching presentations and keeping up with other experts in my industry. But I heard a blogger that said for every one blog post that they produced, they would be sharing it a minimum of 25 to 30 times. That's one blog post, repurposed in many, many different ways. So the reality is, instead of focusing on how you can create 7 different things for all of those things we talked about, what I would advise you to do is this simple system to make sure that you're repurposing and leveraging. I want you to go to your core piece of content. And I know for most of you listening, it's probably going to be a book, it's going to be a product or a program you have, or it's going to be a live event or some sort of live service that you do. And I want you to go into that. And what I want to do, if you're not capturing those things already, or if you're in the process of getting it done, I want you to go through what you have already. And I want you to say, all right, if I were to pull this piece out, or if I were to talk more about this particular piece that's going on, this chapter of the book, or this aspect of my live event, and I was to speak on it further, what would I talk about? Or how would I reinforce that? Or how would I go back to the core concepts that I have in my core offer? And the idea being that you want to start repurposing that content. There are so many ways that you can repurpose those things. So for example, if you take a video of some kind, like let's say you do a Facebook Live of, about a chapter in your book. If you take the audio out of that video, now you have both a video to share and an audio to share. If you take that audio and you get it transcribed, I use something like rev.com, which is rev.com, which costs you like $1 a minute for transcription, or you can transcribe it yourself if you've got the time. Now I've got articles that I can use. And the average person speaks about 100 to 150 words a minute. Me, because I'm crazy, I speak like 300 words a minute. But the average person speaks about 100 to 150 words a minute. And for your blog posts, for the most part, you're going to be targeting 500 to 1,500 words-ish in there. It shouldn't be much longer than that. And so for most of you, that's 5 minutes of talking. That's 5 minutes of video. So if you were to invest 15 minutes each day into creating some content, I would highly recommend it's video if you can do that. If it's not your best, don't worry about it. But if you can, then you are able to easily repurpose that. 15 minutes of your time in video could be one video, one audio, or many audios. It can be transcribed, and that could be 2 or 3 different blogs for you. You can take quotes from those transcripts and make those image things that everyone loves so much with something like Canva to share that. So 15 minutes of your time can become 10 to 15 different pieces of content that you can share over and over and over again. And you can get that across all the different platforms. So that way, instead of just working hard and trying to come up with new concepts and bang your head against the wall every day, go back to your core source and repurpose as often as you can. In fact, for a lot of you, that could be a year of your marketing and promotion, just spending time kind of deepening the concepts and repurposing what you already have. Does that make sense?
Oh, it makes a lot of sense. And I know I do a lot of that myself. And something else that I do is anytime I write a blog post, I do a screenshot and put it on Pinterest.
Yep.
And that takes less than 5 minutes to do that. And I get I've always gotten a lot of people from Pinterest. And regarding what your niche is, you can get clients in the strangest places sometimes because they're everywhere.
And that's exactly right. And it's just taking what you already have. Don't always be so concerned about coming up with the new thing or the new idea. And especially what you'll find when you repurpose content in that way is because it's from the core thing you want people to do, because it's from your book or your live event or your product or service, it's going to direct people right into your book or your live event or your product or service. It's content that makes sense. You know it's going to be connected. And for the most part, most of us don't leverage our content enough. We don't share that stuff enough. We'll post a blog post and then we'll maybe share it once, and that's the only time we use it. And again, like I said, the leading experts are doing it 20 to 25 times per piece of content. So that could be one blog post that you share in different places and you use in many different platforms, and you come back to and deepen that learning again and again. So really focus on what you do best and continue to leverage and repurpose what you've got there. And the other myth that comes up a lot is that a lot of people assume that their customer sees everything they post. So they'll go, all right, well, I already talked about that. Cindy's already seen this. When the reality is most people, you just have to assume, don't see most of what you post. How many of you have had that conversation where you talk to somebody and you said, well, I had this great training last week. How come you weren't on it? And they'll go, well, I didn't know about it. Right. I didn't know you were doing that. And that, even if you sent them an email, posted on social, you talked about it a bunch, most people won't see it. So it's actually not a bad thing to revisit content over and over and post it again and again, because I never know when Cindy's going to happen to be online and happen to see that status or when it's going to catch on. So don't hesitate to go back to those sources and reuse things again and again.
I love that. And I'm just laughing because people do think that, but really sometimes you see something and you don't see it. It takes you a couple times to see it. But even going back to old media, is there any person that can say they've only seen any commercial only one time?
Never. Never. How many of you know a jingle? Like, to me, I always laugh because you'll walk around and you'll hear a commercial like the JG Wentworth 877 now or whatever. Like, everybody's got something like that. You just hear it a million times, and that's why it's stuck with you. So it's exactly what you said. Do not hesitate to go back to what you've used before and kind of your core content.
Lastly, I know that you have a fantastic gift for our listeners. So can you tell us a little bit about the gift?
Sure. So I run a community, as you mentioned, that's called Your Momentum Now. And really what it's about is it's helping people who are becoming experts, or you're becoming a speaker. And that's really your focus, is building out that business, finding more customers, and seeing what other experts are doing and staying networked with them. So I have a free community, which I know you're going to give the URL, that's called Your Momentum Now, where we have new training available every single week in many different areas, from sales and marketing to how you put your marketing funnel ourselves together to some more personal development topics. Like we have great experts that cover things like parenting and practices you can get into as a small business owner. So really, it's an amazing community where we highlight many different experts who focus on working with other experts and other speakers. So if you're someone that really is in the position where you want to become a leading expert in your industry, you want to become somebody that's known for what you do, it's a free way for you to get new training every week and to stay in front of the newest resources. And you mentioned mistakes earlier. One of the resources you get as part of the free community is a webinar training that I did a couple months back that was about 49 of the biggest mistakes that I made and what I learned from them. So a lot of people go, 49, how can you cover that? We actually cover it in 90 minutes, but 49 different mistakes that we made over the years or that I've seen my clients make that really changed how I market and how I think about it. So resources like that are added every single week to the community. And so you're going to mention where they can get signed up for that in just a minute.
Yes. All links mentioned on today's show can be found on bizsuccessin15.com, where you can also re-listen to today's episode. You can download it so if you can listen to it again, because a lot of times whenever you listen to it a second time, you get more knowledge and there's more wisdom coming out. So again, that's bizsuccessin15.com, and you'll also be able to catch up on past episodes from other experts as well. Ken, do you have any parting words for our listeners?
Just stay the course. I find that a lot of people, especially when you talk marketing, as you mentioned, it's a dirty word and it takes time to get used to it. It takes time to get used to talking about yourself, especially for those of you who are brand new to this, or you might have, still that mindset of figuring out how to talk about yourself and doing what you're doing. This expertise all comes from experience. So the more experience that you take on, the more that you stay the course of what you set out to do and what you're trying to do, the more wisdom you'll get. So, I know it's cliche to say don't give up on your dream and don't give up on what you're doing. But again, it's that 3 feet from gold of saying, most of you are only a few steps away or a few experiences away from getting where you want to get or finding the person that you want to find. So stay the course for what you're doing.
Stay the course. I love it. So thank you for being our guest today, Ken. It's been an honor.
Thanks,
and for our listeners, I hope you enjoyed today's show. You want to be sure to hop on over to bizsuccessin15.com and link over to Ken's free gift and join his free community. So I do want to say big hugs to you all. And be sure to tune in next week. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
You've been listening to Biz Success in 15. For all links mentioned in today's show and to watch or listen to previous episodes, visit bizsuccessin15.com. Thanks so much for listening, and be sure to tune in next week for another amazing guest.